Hello and welcome back. And in this video, we are going to be looking at binding. So we've been using binding we've used it in a couple of videos, and we have seen how it works, but we never actually took time to understand how binding actually really works in SwiftUI. So let's go ahead and take a pause here from like regular stuff that we've been doing all along, and just understand binding a little bit better, just like we did like state in last few videos. So binding actually is the other side of the story that state provides. So state is actually where you think about ownership. So binding and state actually defines the how the object ownership is defined. So biggest difference between state and binding is who owns and who is the source of truth. Okay, so basically, if you mark your views property with state, then as you learned in last video, that state actually has the ownership and it actually maintains the source of truth. So whenever the state changes, your view can change according to the changes in state. Okay, now where does binding fit in this scenario? So binding is basically a property or property wrapper that has read and write access, but it does not have the ownership. So it's actually eligible to read stuff from state and write stuff into the state, but it does not have the ownership. It's not the source of truth. So basically, ultimately, it's your state that's getting changed eventually by using binding, but it's actually not maintaining the source of truth. It's the state's responsibility to maintain that source of truth. And basically, binding properties have access to the values, and you use it mostly in parent-child scenario. So we're gonna take a look at an example, like how we're gonna use it in parent-child scenario. But basically, parent view passes on a value of state using binding into its child view, and then child view actually references it, uses it, and then modifies the state back and reflects it back to the parent. And that's how binding and states relationship works. So let's go ahead and take a look, like how we can actually understand a little bit this concept a little bit better. So we're gonna build upon, or like use the same model that we used in last video for recipes. So in case you've missed that, here is your recipe object. So basically what we have is we have this recipe that conform to identifiable. It has a UUID, an ID of type UUID, a name of the recipe, and ingredients. And then we are creating this static function that returns some of the recipes for us as a dummy data, so we can actually work with it. And we're going to use the same data model. So let's go ahead and create recipes. And we can actually get recipes by referencing recipe.all recipes. Okay, and then we're going to create a state object that's going to show that's going to be called show ingredients. Okay, and we're going to set it to false. Basically, what we are doing is we're going to have this toggle at the top to show ingredients or not within the list view. And whenever the toggle is on, we're going to show the ingredients for the recipe. When the toggle is off, we're not going to show ingredients, just the name of the recipe. Okay, so that's what we are building, and we can build a VStack. And in this VStack, we can have a toggle first. And toggle has is on, so we're gonna bind our show ingredients. So $show ingredients to that. That dollar symbol is actually what binds your state to a variable. So that's why it's called binding. So we are binding using $show ingredient. Okay, and then we can provide our view. So we don't need all these. We can simply say text, and this text is going to be show ingredients, like so. Okay, now we're going to add some padding to this, and let's go ahead and resume our view so we can see what we've got so far. And this is what we have. We have this toggle that actually goes on and off, okay, and state changes according to that. Now let's create a list, and we're gonna create for each inside the list on recipes, okay, and recipe, and we're gonna simply show a text with recipe dot name. Okay, let's give it a foreground color of maybe blue. Okay, and then we're gonna say if show ingredients. So that means if show ingredients is true, in that case, we gotta reference it using self. Show ingredients is true, then we wanna show our text that contains the ingredient. So recipe dot ingredients dot joined by a separator that is a new line separator, and let's add some font. So we're gonna define a font to be subheadline and foreground color to be secondary. Okay, which is kind of like a gray. Okay, so now we have this this view showing. Whenever we toggle on and off, we actually show our ingredient, and this is your collapsible view that we are creating here. So we created a collapsible table. Whenever we have like this toggle on, we actually collapse. We collapse everything off and collapse everything on. Okay, so basically show everything and hide the ingredients. Okay, so now where does where does binding fit into this scenario? Okay, so imagine like, you had this very complex view. You don't want to like define all that here. What you want to do is instead, like, you want to move this into its own view. And that's what, like, view composition is a big part in SwiftUI. So you're talking about creating reusable views, but then you have this issue of basically having these two dependencies of show ingredient and recipe, and you want to actually pass those into your subview. So let's go ahead and see how we can do that. So we're going to create a struct recipe cell. We're going to call that one, and we're going to have two variables, recipe of type recipe. Okay, and we need a way to basically get the value of the state here. Okay, so we can actually toggle that show on and off, right? So what we can do is we can create binding. So we can create binding var show ingredients. Okay, and this is going to be of type boolean. Now, one thing you're going to notice whenever we are going to initialize this particular struct, usually if you have a struct that has undefined or like uninitialized variable, then it asks you during the initialization phase that, hey, give me a default value. But you're gonna see like how this is gonna be different. Okay, so we're gonna say var body some view, and then we create a group because we wanna return a group, and I'm gonna take all this and cut it from here and paste it here. Okay, so we have recipe, we have show ingredients that's being passed on. Okay, so with everything ready, we're gonna go into our for each and we're gonna say recipe cell, and notice what we have. So we are expecting a recipe to be passed, but instead of having a regular boolean to be passed, we are asking it to provide a bindable boolean. So this is exactly same as like passing on this. So we simply need to do is like self dot dollar show ingredient, and with that change, our view should be performing the way it is. So none of the functionality has changed. So it's still operational just like regular, but you can notice, you can see like, with the help of state and binding, we have decoupled our views and basically made this view reusable. So let's say if you had this recipe recipe cell that needs to be shown on the detail view, then you can reuse this same view in the detail view, and you don't have to create another view for that. I mean, if you had written this inside your for each loop, then you'd have to actually write that over and over again, which is not the good practice. I mean, as we all know how it actually grows into a maintenance nightmare. So yeah, this is basically mainly how you use your binding along with your state. So basically, binding is something that is observing for read and writes, and actually it is able to communicate back to its owner, like object's owner, that hey, something has changed, and like can update its state. And state, once again, is the ownership has the ownership of that particular variable or that particular object, and it actually maintains the source of truth. Okay, so hope this helps you like understand state and binding a little bit better. In the next video, I want to show you one more example of binding, where we're gonna actually do a for loop a little bit different to show you like how we can basically provide binding on individual cells. Right now, it's actually at the top level, but we're gonna provide it like at the cell level, and see we're gonna see how we can handle that situation. Okay, so I will see you guys in next video, and thanks again for watching this video.